I was reviewing the final Q3 productivity metrics when the notification from our reception desk flashed on my screen. The investors from Zenith Capital and Summit Group had arrived 20 minutes early. Along with them, the new VP of Operations had just walked through the front doors. I had been awake since 5 a.m., preparing the presentation for this board meeting. This was the day I would pitch our international expansion strategy to secure our Series B funding. We had built this business from a blank text editor in my living room to a company valued at $45 in just 4 years, and today was pivotal. I stood up, smoothed my gray wool blazer, gathered my notes, and walked out of my office toward the lobby. In the lobby, our logo, Integra Analytics, glowed in soft blue. Naomi from Zenith Capital and Gavin from Summit Group were talking to a tall man in a navy suit. That was Julian Foster. The board had strongly advised me to hire an outside executive to manage daily operations so I could focus on our long-term product vision. After a long search, we had hired Julian, a former strategy director from a top-tier consulting firm with a Harvard MBA. He turned around as I approached. He had that clean-shaven, effortless confidence that comes from corporate validation. He did not know my face because we had conducted his final interviews via video call while I was traveling, and he had not bothered to look at my profile on our company website. He looked at me, glanced at the tablet in my hand, and made an instant assumption. Without pausing his conversation with Gavin, Julian slipped off his heavy cashmere overcoat and tossed it directly at me. The coat landed across my arms. "Get me a black coffee with no sugar, and hang up my coat in the executive closet, sweetheart," Julian said, his voice flat. "The board meeting is for executives only, so make sure the room is locked after we go in." I stood there, holding the warm wool coat, feeling the weight of his dismissal. I looked at Naomi, whose eyes had gone wide with shock. Gavin looked away, coughing into his hand, clearly uncomfortable. Our receptionist, Sarah, looked mortified. In that silent space, I had choices. I could have dropped the coat. I could have corrected him loudly in front of the investors and watched him squirm. But I have learned that anger is a tool best used when cold and precise. I nodded, keeping my face completely neutral. "Of course," I said quietly. I turned and walked toward the executive corridor, carrying his coat. I had walked about 10 steps when Julian called out after me. "Oh, and if you see Clara Jennings, tell her I am here. We need to start on time." I did not turn back. I simply nodded again and kept walking. "My name is Clara Jennings. I am 48 years old, and I have spent the last 4 years of my life coding, building, and running Integra Analytics. I wrote our original database architecture myself. I knew every server configuration, client, and employee. But to Julian, I was just a nameless assistant in a blazer who was useful for carrying his coat." I walked into my private office, hung his expensive cashmere coat in my closet, and sat down at my desk. I pulled out my phone and sent a text to Chloe, my chief of staff. "Meeting starts in 5 minutes. Bring the keynote slides to the boardroom." Then I texted Naomi, "Running a few minutes late. Please take your seats." When I walked into the boardroom, the atmosphere was relaxed. The investors and Julian were sitting around the long walnut table. Julian was already telling a story about a major corporate turnaround. "Sorry I am late," I said, walking to the head of the table. Julian looked up, his smile freezing as Chloe walked in behind me and handed me the presentation clicker. "Before we begin the presentation, I want to welcome everyone," I said, looking directly at Julian. "I believe some introductions are in order. I am Clara Jennings, the founder and CEO of Integra Analytics, and you must be Julian Foster, our new VP of Operations." The color drained from Julian's face so fast he looked ill. He reached for his water glass, his hand shaking. "I believe you were looking for me in the lobby, Julian," I added, holding his gaze until he looked down. "I understand you wanted a black coffee. I am afraid we will have to focus on the expansion strategy first." The meeting proceeded. I delivered our expansion presentation, answered Gavin's technical questions, and secured approval. Julian remained silent, nodding along. When the meeting adjourned, Julian waited until the investors left, then walked over to my side. "Clara, I want to apologize for the lobby," he said, his voice low. "It was a stupid mistake. I made a bad assumption." I shook his hand, my grip firm. "Yes, you did, Julian. Your coat is in my office closet. We have our first one-on-one meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. We can discuss your role and my expectations then. I walked out before he could say another word. That night, I called my close friend Ruby, who ran a software security firm. I told her what had happened. Ruby did not hesitate. Fire him immediately, Clara. A man who treats people like that on day one is going to poison your company. He does not respect you. I looked out my window at the city lights. I want to, Ruby, but if I fire him now without documented cause, the board will think I am being emotional. I need to document his performance and see who he really is. Ruby sighed. Just be careful. Men like Julian do not handle humiliation well. They do not change. I knew she was right, but I needed a plan. The following morning, I arrived at the office early. I spent the first hour reviewing Julian Foster's personnel file, his interview logs, and the original feedback from our recruiters. On paper, his credentials were pristine. Harvard MBA, 5 years at Boston Consulting Group, and 2 successful exits at mid-sized tech companies. But as I read, a comment from a former colleague in his reference check caught my attention. The colleague noted that Julian was excellent at managing up, but could be dismissive of those he considered beneath him. I had ignored it during the hiring rush, chalking it up to minor corporate friction. Now, it felt like a significant warning sign. Julian knocked on my door at exactly 9 a.m. His posture was confident, but his smile was tight. He sat in the leather chair across from my desk and crossed his legs. "Clara, I want to address yesterday morning again," he began. "It was a chaotic start, and I apologize for the misunderstanding. I want to build a strong partnership with you." I studied him for a moment. "What made you assume I was an assistant, Julian?" The question caught him off guard. His smile faltered. "Well, the meeting was scheduled for later, and you were in the lobby instead of the boardroom," he explained, his voice smooth but slightly defensive. "I simply made an assumption based on the timing. It was an honest mistake." I nodded slowly. "Julian, I hired you because your operational experience can help us scale. But you need to understand that this company operates on respect. Every employee, from the front desk to this office, is critical to our success. If you treat anyone like they are beneath you, it will not work." "I understand completely," Julian answered quickly, leaning forward. "I am here to support your vision and help scale operations." For the next hour, we reviewed his onboarding schedule and immediate goals. He was articulate and offered sharp insights about our supply chain and vendor management. I wanted to believe that the lobby incident was just a terrible first impression. But over the next 2 weeks, my optimism disappeared. The pattern began to emerge, clear and consistent. During our first executive staff meeting, Ashley, our head of marketing, was presenting our new user acquisition strategy. Julian interrupted her 3 separate times, talking over her to redirect the conversation. Yet, when a male product manager spoke, Julian listened intently, nodding and taking notes. A few days later, Amber, our CFO, presented our conservative Q4 financial projections. Julian did not challenge her in the meeting. Instead, he later sent an email to the board members, including Gavin and Naomi, suggesting Amber's projections were overly cautious and that he had a more aggressive, realistic forecast. He had not shared this forecast with Amber or me first. He was trying to position himself as the smarter executive. The tension peaked during a strategy session on our enterprise sales model. Julian stood up, writing on the whiteboard. "We need to pivot entirely to Fortune 500 clients," he announced. "Our current focus on mid-market companies is too small." That strategy directly contradicted the core plan I had established. "What data supports this pivot, Julian?" I asked. He smiled with easy confidence. "My experience at BCG. We saw this pattern repeatedly. We need to think bigger." I looked at him. "I would like to see a detailed analysis of our market capacity and acquisition costs for that segment." "Can you have it on my desk by tomorrow?" "Of course," he said, but the analysis never came. The next morning, Julian simply forwarded a generic industry article about enterprise software sales, with a few lines highlighted. It was lazy and showed a complete lack of real preparation. That evening, I called Chloe, my chief of staff, into my office. "I need you to monitor Julian's schedule," I told her, closing the door. "Keep track of any meetings he schedules with our board members or external partners." Chloe nodded. "I have already noticed something, Clara. He scheduled a lunch with Gavin from Summit Group yesterday. It was not on the shared calendar. He labeled it as a personal meeting, but one of Gavin's assistants confirmed they discussed our strategic direction." He is going around you, Clara. And there is more. Liam, our head of engineering, told me Julian has been asking a lot of questions about our proprietary algorithms. I sat back in my chair. Julian was an operations guy. He had no business poking around our technical architecture. What kind of questions? He wanted to know how our predictive analytics engine handles real-time data ingestion, Chloe said. Liam felt uncomfortable. Julian claimed he needed the information to write a strategic roadmap, but the questions were very specific to our intellectual property. I felt a cold chill. Julian was not just trying to undermine my leadership. He was actively gathering intelligence on our core technology. I thanked Chloe and told her to keep watching. When she left, I opened my laptop and reviewed Julian's employment contract, focusing on the intellectual property, non-disclosure, and non-compete clauses. I needed to know exactly what legal boundaries he was crossing. He was playing a dangerous game, and I was going to make sure he lost. The next morning, I met with Fiona, our legal counsel. I closed the door to my office and explained my concerns about Julian's actions. I told her about his unauthorized meetings with Gavin and his unusual inquiries into our technical architecture. I need to know our options, Fiona, I said. If he is attempting to steal our technology or plan a hostile coup, how do we protect ourselves? Fiona leaned back, adjusting her glasses. Under federal law, we have strong protections, she explained. If he takes our proprietary code, it is a violation of the Defend Trade Secrets Act, specifically 18 U.S.C. Section 1836, that allows us to seek injunctions and damages for misappropriation. Furthermore, if he accesses systems beyond his authorized scope, he could be liable under the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, which is 18 U.S.C. Section 1030. But we need hard proof. We cannot just accuse him based on suspicious questions. What about monitoring his activities? I asked. Fiona nodded. Our standard employment agreements include clear clauses where employees consent to monitoring on company devices and network systems for compliance and security purposes. Anything he does on our company network, including his emails and file downloads, is legally subject to our review. I thanked Fiona and immediately called Liam, our head of engineering, into my office. Liam had been with me since the first year of the company, and I trusted him completely. Liam, has Julian asked for direct access to our core repository? I asked. Liam's expression darkened. Yes, yesterday afternoon. He demanded the access keys to our production server, claiming he needed to audit our system performance. I told him I needed your approval first. He was furious and accused me of obstructing his work. He is trying to get the source code, Clara. I stood up and walked to the window. We cannot just block him. He will find another way or complain to the board that I am micromanaging him. We need to catch him in the act. Can we create a sandbox environment? Liam's eyes lit up. A mirror environment? Yes, easily. I can set up a sandbox that looks exactly like our production database. It will contain all our user interfaces and folder structures, but the actual algorithms inside will be altered. We can insert a digital fingerprint, a series of unique, non-functional code sequences. If that code ever shows up outside our network, it will prove beyond doubt that it came from that specific sandbox. And I can redirect Julian's credentials so that whenever he tries to access our repositories, he is automatically sent to this sandbox without knowing it. Perfect, I said. Set it up immediately. Ensure every file access, search, and download he performs is logged. Now, I needed a way to keep Julian occupied while we gathered our evidence. I had to create a scenario where he would feel confident enough to make a mistake. The following day, I called an emergency executive meeting. I announced that the board was considering the creation of a new position, Chief Innovation Officer. This role would oversee our next-generation technology products and present our roadmap directly to the major investors. It was a highly visible, prestigious title. As I spoke, I watched Julian. He sat up straight, his eyes locked on me. He was practically vibrating with interest. This was exactly the kind of title he wanted. It would give him the direct board access he needed to push me out. However, I continued, the board has agreed that any internal candidate for the CIO position must complete our new leadership development program. It is a 6-week rotation across all departments. To lead innovation, you must understand how every part of the company functions from the ground up. You will start next week. Julian's smile tightened. Rotation? For executive candidates? Yes, I said. You will spend your first week working with Sarah in office management and administrative support, followed by a week with Alicia in customer experience, handling support tickets. It will ensure you understand our internal workflow and customer pain points. Julian looked outraged. Clara, with all due respect, I have led large organizations. Spending a week doing front desk tasks and answering support tickets is not a good use of my time or my salary. I met his gaze, keeping my voice calm. The program is mandatory for the CIO position, Julian. If you feel it is beneath you, you do not have to apply. But if you want the role, you start on Monday with Sarah. I could see the calculation in his eyes. He hated the idea of doing clerical work, but his ambition was too strong. He believed that once he became CIO, he would have the leverage to remove me. Fine, he said, his voice cold. If that is what the board requires, I will do it. Monday morning, Julian reported to Sarah at the reception desk. The trap was set by Wednesday of that first week. Julian Foster's professional facade was completely gone. Sarah, our office manager, came into my office after hours, looking exhausted. Clara, I cannot work with him anymore, she said. He spent the first 2 days sitting at the front desks with his AirPods in, ignoring visitors and transferring phone calls to the wrong departments. Whenever I asked him to help with basic tasks like sorting the mail or organizing the meeting rooms, he told me he had important strategic calls to take. He is constantly whispering on his cell phone in the corner. Sarah's report was exactly what I had expected. Julian believed administrative work was beneath him, completely missing the point that our office support staff was the backbone of our daily operations. On Thursday morning, Sarah sent me a text message. Julian is not at the desk. He said he had a strategic planning emergency and walked out. I got up from my desk and walked down the hall to find him. I spotted him in our glass-walled conference room. His laptop was open, and he was on a video call. I stood outside for a moment, observing. He was presenting a slide deck to the person on the screen. I recognized the layout of the slides. It was our internal financial data, but the title read, Integra Analytics Leadership Transition Proposal. I saw Gavin's face on the screen. Julian was pitching my board member on a plan to replace me as CEO. I knocked lightly on the glass door and walked in. Julian immediately closed his laptop, but his expression remained calm. Clara, he said, smoothing his tie, I am just finalizing some strategic notes. Julian, I believe you were supposed to be assisting Sarah at the front desk today, I said. He stood up, adopting a patronizing tone. Clara, we need to be realistic about time management. While I appreciate the culture-building aspect of this program, I have pressing strategic matters that require my attention. I cannot waste valuable hours sorting mail when the company faces scaling challenges. I looked at him. The rotation is not optional, Julian. It represents our company values. If you cannot respect the work our support staff does, you cannot lead this company, he sighed. I have advised Fortune 100 CEOs, Clara. A VP of operations should not be answering phones. It is not an efficient allocation of resources. That is your opinion, I replied. But how you handle this rotation tells me everything about your alignment with our culture. He walked out, his jaw clenched, returning to the reception desk for the remainder of the day. The next week, Julian moved to the customer experience department under Alicia. Alicia's feedback was even worse. He refused to handle a single support ticket. He told Alicia that resolving minor user interface complaints was a waste of his analytical skills. Instead, Alicia noticed him asking detailed questions about where we stored our client database backups and how our data pipeline connected to our proprietary analytics engine. He was not interested in customer satisfaction. He was mapping our data infrastructure. On Thursday night, I received a phone call from Liam. Clara, we got him, Liam said, his voice tense with excitement. The sandbox logs just updated. Julian logged into our server environment from his company laptop at 11:30 p.m. He went straight for our core predictive algorithms. He downloaded the entire repository. I leaned forward. Are you sure it was the sandbox? Yes, Liam confirmed. His credentials were redirected to the mirror environment. He thinks he just downloaded the actual production source code. The logs show he pulled down over 20 gigabytes of data, including all our core design documents, database schemas, and the watermarked machine learning algorithms. I sat back feeling a mixture of relief and anger. We had the hard proof. Julian had accessed files completely unrelated to his role as VP of Operations, and he had done so under the cover of night, copying what he believed was our most valuable proprietary asset. The next morning, I met with Fiona in her office. We compiled the evidence folder. It was a comprehensive file. First, the technical logs from Liam documenting the unauthorized access and download of the 20 gigabytes of data from the sandbox, showing the exact IP address of Julian's laptop. Second, the written performance reports from Sarah and Alicia, documenting his refusal to perform his duties and his abandonment of his assigned positions. Third, the records Chloe had gathered of his private meetings and calls with Gavin, suggesting a breach of his fiduciary duty to the company. Fiona looked over the documents, a cold smile on her face. This is airtight, Clara. He did not just violate company policy. By accessing these files without authorization and downloading our core technology, he has violated the Federal Computer Fraud and Abuse Act under 18 U.S.C. Section 1030. And by attempting to copy our technology, he has violated the Defend Trade Secrets Act under 18 U.S.C. Section 1836. He has also breached his fiduciary duty as an officer of this company. We have enough to terminate him for cause immediately and initiate legal action. I shook my head. Not yet. The monthly board meeting is tomorrow. I want him to face the investors first. I want Gavin and Naomi to see exactly who they forced me to hire. The monthly board meeting began at 9 a.m. sharp on Friday. The atmosphere in the conference room was formal and quiet. Naomi from Zenith Capital and Gavin from Summit Group sat at the table, taking notes. Julian Foster sat near the opposite end, looking relaxed and confident. He had brought a physical folder, probably containing his proposals, to replace me. He gave me a brief nod, his eyes cool and dismissive. I sat at the head of the table. To my left was Liam, our head of engineering, and to my right was Fiona, our legal counsel. We went through the quarterly financial update quickly. Amber's reports were spotless, and the board approved them without discussion. When we reached the operations and technology update, I looked at the board. Before we review our technical roadmap, I want to address a critical security and compliance matter, I said. The room quieted instantly. Julian leaned back, crossing his arms. Liam, please present your report. Liam connected his laptop to the wall display. On the screen, a series of network logs appeared, highlighted in red. Over the past 2 weeks, we observed unusual file access on our development servers. Liam began. An internal account logged in during non-working hours, specifically between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m. and downloaded large volumes of proprietary data. The total download reached 20 gigabytes of files. Julian's expression did not change. He raised his hand slightly. As the VP of Operations, I am tasked with analyzing our scaling capabilities. I accessed the repositories to audit our infrastructure. It was part of my preparation for the proposed Chief Innovation Officer role. That is within my operational scope. Liam looked at Julian. You did not download system reports, Julian. You downloaded our core predictive analytics database, the entire source code for our machine learning engine, and our private customer data schemas. These files are restricted and have nothing to do with operations. Furthermore, the environment you accessed was our technical sandbox. The files you downloaded were custom watermarked with a digital fingerprint. Julian's face turned pale. Sandbox? What are you talking about? It was a mirror environment. I stepped in, my voice calm and steady. The files you downloaded contain unique, non-functional code sequences. They are registered under your specific login credentials. If those files are ever copied, shared, or compiled outside our company servers, we will know instantly. I slid a thick document folder across the table to Naomi and Gavin. Naomi opened it, her eyes scanning the pages. This folder contains the complete evidence of your activities, Julian, I said. Your unauthorized access to our core systems constitutes a direct violation of the Federal Computer Fraud and Abuse Act under 18 U.S.C. Section 1030 because you exceeded your authorized access to copy proprietary data. Furthermore, by downloading and attempting to misappropriate our core technology, you are in violation of the Defend Trade Secrets Act under 18 U.S.C. Section 1836. I turned my gaze to Gavin. Julian has also scheduled several private meetings with you and other external partners to propose a leadership transition, presenting confidential company data without authorization. This is a severe breach of his fiduciary duty to Integra Analytics as an executive officer. Julian stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. This is a setup, he shouted, his professional calm completely breaking. He looked at Naomi and Gavin, his face red. Are you really going to listen to this? I was brought in to provide actual executive leadership. Clara is a developer who got lucky. She is running a $45 M company like a local tech shop. She tried to humiliate me by making me work the reception desk and answer support tickets. I have an MBA from Harvard and worked at BCG. I do not answer phones or fetch coffee for anyone. The conference room fell completely silent. Julian stood there, breathing heavily, his words hanging in the air. He had just confirmed every accusation. He had shown the board his complete contempt for the company's culture, its people, and its founder. Naomi looked at Julian, her expression cold. Julian, this company was built on the principle that every employee's contribution matters, she said. The fact that you consider working with our front desk and customer service teams to be humiliating tells me you do not belong here. And the fact that you stole our intellectual property is a legal matter. Gavin nodded in agreement. Looking at the documents, I agree. This is a clear case of termination for cause. Your employment with Integra Analytics is terminated, effective immediately, Julian. You will receive no severance, and all your unvested stock options are canceled. Our security team will escort you out of the building. Julian looked at Gavin, then at Naomi, realizing he had lost everything. He gathered his laptop, his hands shaking, and walked out of the room, followed by our head of security. After the door closed, Naomi looked at me. I apologize, Clara. We pushed you to hire him. We thought he had the credentials to help us scale. I smiled gently. Credentials do not replace character, Naomi. We will scale, but we will do it with leaders who respect our team. That evening, I walked out of the office into the quiet lobby. Sarah was packing her bag at the reception desk. Have a good weekend, Sarah, I said. Thank you, Clara, she smiled. You too. I walked to my car feeling a deep sense of relief. We had protected our technology, our culture, and our people. Ton chom va ching chuk, kom chi la nying ko hio chen thung. Chom la nying zachi tuk te bao ve su tang kong kwa duang yip. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe. What would you have done in my situation? Let me know in the comments.